This episode is brought to you by Pixel 2 Editions, a full-service fine art printing company. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, an art podcast that has it all. I'm your host, Galina Marquez, and I invite fascinating people to talk about their personal creative journeys, success stories, and inspiration. We talk about art business and marketing, how to find your creative voice, and all the new trends in the art world like NFT, AI, and such. Join me and my guest for today's conversation. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. And I am with another enigma today, the woman who I met the first time. We were talking for the first time. Her name is Jena Olson. She's here in San Diego. She's an amazing watercolor artist and a huge activist, a grassroots activist, and a deputy director of the cool nonprofit, which we're actually going to be talking about as well. So, hi, Jena. Why wouldn't you introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Jena Olson. I was thinking about how to even introduce myself. Sorry, there's a plane going overhead. Just as we said it wasn't going to be loud, there's a helicopter going overhead.
Yeah, I actually can't hear it, so maybe it's going to be fine.
Okay, good. I'm sitting outside right now, so who knows what's going to happen. So I was listening to your podcast, and I just to try to get a sense of what this was all going to be about. And I have to say the part that I was most befuddled by was how to introduce myself. Because then you're like, and now it's time to introduce yourself. How do I introduce myself on a podcast like this? Because I'm so used to just introducing myself as, I'm deputy director of WIA. We do, and then I was like, how do I introduce myself as an artist? Am I allowed to introduce myself as an artist?
You are required to introduce yourself as an artist.
Well, I imagine your listeners will, some of them can relate to that, just coming into your own identity as an artist, like who gets to identify themselves and as an artist, and what does that mean? So it used to be easier back in the day. I actually was a professional photographer for many years. And so that was easier for me to identify myself as a photographer because for some reason, in the world that we're living, if you make money from it, then you're allowed to introduce yourself as such. So anyway, a long preamble to say that, I am, my day job is deputy director of WIA. We're a gender equity organization in working to advance people of underrepresented gender, women and non-binary folks in animation, VFX, and gaming. See, that introduction I have down because I do that every day. In my non-paid work and my other life, I identify, I guess, as an artist. I have been doing art since I was very, very little, and in all sorts of forms. I'm a classically trained cellist and pianist, although I haven't played for a very long time. I was a dancer. I was always doing art in some way, shape, or form. And then I got into photography in my 20s, and basically through my 20s and my 30s, actually spent. That was how I made money, was as a photographer first and foremost. I also worked in nonprofits, sort of both fields, both as a professional artist and in nonprofits. And now I am really an artist kind of in my spare time when I have the time to do it. I'm a full-time employee. I'm a mother.
And twice full time.
Yes, exactly. So art happens when I can make it happen. And currently and for the past couple of years, I've been working in watercolor.
Yeah, and those watercolors are amazing. So I actually wanted let's talk a little bit about your involvement with nonprofits. And you mentioned that you were a photographer for nonprofit organizations.
Yes.
Which is funny because tomorrow, so we're recording on February 11th. February 12th is the release of the episode with Peter Mertz, who is the fine art photographer who's been for decades in California, has been involved in nonprofit organizations. So yeah. I wanted to hear. I mean, obviously, you haven't heard that episode yet. It's
no.
It's coming out tomorrow. but like as I was going through some of the materials today to put the show notes together and everything. And you were bringing this up, and I was like, "Oh, that would be interesting to hear another perspective on this." So, how was that for you to work as a artist photographer with nonprofits, and what kind of nonprofits?
Yeah, so it's actually because of my work in the nonprofit that I started off. I kind of live two lives. There's my artist life, and there's my nonprofit life, and they do meet quite a bit. And actually I found that a good portion of my working career has been finding ways to meet my artistry and my love for art and nonprofit work, and specifically social justice work. That's really my happy places where I can be working in the field of advancing social justice and art. And so we moved to San Diego from Wisconsin. You'll hear that in my accent. I'm told I have an accent. I don't believe it, but
I'm told I have an accent, but I'm from Russia. So.
Like, I don't hear it.
I don't hear your accent.
Well, you will if I get tired or I'm and it comes out in certain ways. But anyway, we moved to San Diego about 15 years ago. From Wisconsin. And back when I was in Wisconsin, that's where I started doing photography, really intently. Started my business when I was there, doing weddings and portraits, standard photography, bread and butter, it's the way to make money. And when we moved out here, I was really looking for a way to continue being involved in the community. I think the photography world, particularly running your own business, can be, on some levels, it can be kind of lonely because, there's a great photography community out here. Absolutely. But it can also, I guess for me, it didn't feel like the work that I was doing was really kind of advancing the world in any real way. It was like I was making a lot of people very happy with my photography, but not necessarily moving the world forward in the way that I wanted to. And so, and I was sharing this with another photographer friend of mine, and she said, "Oh, did you hear about this nonprofit called the Aja Project?" And I said, "No, I had never heard of them." And I looked them up, and I was like, "Okay, this is it. This is what I want to be doing." And so for years, I started out as a teaching artist for the Aja Project, working in middle schools and high schools, teaching photography to kids, basically. And then eventually became their program manager, totally loved it, and decided I wanted to go back to school for nonprofit leadership and management, so that I could do exactly that with, advancing art education and social justice nonprofits. So that's really, and then I did both full-time photography and full-time nonprofit work, and had kids, and I had a lot more energy back then. And then now I've kind of moved from, at the time, the balance of my life was working as a professional photographer with a bit of nonprofit work, when I could make it, and then kind of slowly made the transition to now for a long time now, I've been working as a full-time professional nonprofit executive with art on the side. So
I see. Well, for those of our listeners who don't know about Aja Project, can you talk a little bit of can you describe what it is? What's the organization doing?
Yeah, so they've evolved quite a bit over the years, and frankly, I've lost touch a little bit with what they're doing currently. I think they've evolved to move beyond photography, or expanded to include other art forms. And I admit that I'm not entirely sure, so your listeners should definitely look them up. It's AJA, the Aja Project, based in City Heights. But when I came on board with them as a teaching artist, They were kind of their core work was working with refugee youth who had just moved to San Diego and were using the camera as a way to explore their world, understand their new world, and express themselves and be able to process, process just the journey that they had been on and were currently going through. So I taught photography to them as a means of self-expression.
Wow, that sounds really awesome.
It was
And yeah, and I wonder what they're doing now. I will totally look them up.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should.
So right now you are a deputy director at the VIA.
Yeah. Yep.
VIA. And you are working with artists as well. So how, like, you're representing underrepresented youth, right? So
So WIA is actually we don't work with youth. We work with women, both cis and trans women and non-binary folks that want to get into the animation industry,
okay.
and or move up through the pipeline. So we work to get folks in jobs basically in animation. So my role in essentially running that organization, the organization itself, I'm working with our staff to manage programs that advance folks, whether that's our event series that we have a leadership institute that we just launched, we have a mentorship program, a talent database. So there's a variety of ways that we try to support folks that are trying to get into the industry or advance their career in the industry.
Well, that's interesting. And why animation?
Like, how did I get into it? Yeah, it's kind of funny. Why animation? I was not seeking out animation. So when the pandemic hit, I was actually working for a STEM education. I was the CEO of a STEM education nonprofit, a very a different kind of world from the art space that I had been in. But still very exciting to me because I was working, we talked a lot about creativity and expanding creativity through engineering in youth. And so it's still, there was definitely a through line there, but it was a departure from my real focus on art. And when the pandemic hit, that for a variety of reasons, as you can imagine, like not a lot of nonprofits, we had to sort of cocoon and pause operations to figure out what was going on. And so I left that organization and focused on basically raising my kids through the pandemic, homeschooling and or remote schooling and all that. But when I was ready to start looking for work again, quite honestly, this was just a job that popped up. They were looking for a head of operations and at the time, and I thought, well, this looks interesting. Animation is a completely new space for me, but I knew the work about leading nonprofits. I mean, that's my expertise. But I didn't know anything about animation. So that was actually really exciting to me because I had the ability to take this really powerful organization, powerful in the sense that they had a lot of good people doing really, really good work that were wanting to kind of move into that next stage of their life cycle. I had the ability to do that because of my expertise in nonprofit leadership, while kind of learning about a whole new industry that is supporting artists. So it was the best of both worlds. So I applied and fell in love with the organization, and they offered me the role, and here I am. So I was not seeking it out at all. It was like, it was a post on Indeed.com or something like that, and it just worked out.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a really great fit for you. And are they based in San Diego? Because like my question, I guess, was like you would think animation should be based somewhere more in LA.
Yeah, so no, we're not. Um, the the staff is 100% remote. So
Okay, I see. Right.
yeah, so at this point we really have a global footprint. And so we like to say we're headquartered in the cloud. But half of our board members are in Los Angeles. And
Mhm.
as you said, a vast majority of the industry is in Los Angeles. But our staff is completely remote. So I'm down here in San Diego. We've got another person up in Portland. We've about half of our staff is in LA. We've got someone in Oklahoma. But we also have a really a global footprint. So while the industry is still, based in LA, there's a huge number of people that want to get into the industry that are all over the world.
Yeah.
So we have communities in various places around the world, from Italy to Germany, and the two places that we're developing our relationships. We've got a community in Colombia, in Mexico City, in Nepal, in India.
Wow.
So we've got
That's amazing.
yeah, and there are those pockets of animation communities all over.
That's
So
impressive. And when you're talking about animation, so I like obviously as an artist, I keep thinking that you're helping folks to be trained as professional animators, or there's like other aspects of animation business that you're helping them to get involved in.
it's anyone who wants to be in the industry in some way, shape, or form. So the animators themselves are really um, a small part of the work, an important part, obviously, but there's an entire pipeline, from start to finish. So anyone who wants to be involved in that, whether it's concept artists, writers, voice actors, people that are doing post-production work, anywhere in between that, we're supporting them in that.
That's amazing. I honestly never thought about animation being kind of a um, well, when I'm thinking animation, I'm thinking Disney and Pixar, right?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
those are like huge monstrosities, and
Sure.
yeah. So thinking about it in terms of grassroots and nonprofit is kind of like it's awesome that this exists. It's awesome that this yeah the organization is actually filling up the pipeline with
Mhm.
amazing talented people who otherwise might not have had the chance to get into the industry. That's
Yeah, that's
awesome.
absolutely
That's
it.
really cool. Yeah, well, all right, so let's then switch. I mean, I get it. You can talk about nonprofit probably day in
Yeah,
and day out, and that's what you're doing.
that's my day job. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually really wanted to talk to you about your watercolors because that's what I see on your Instagram, and it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. You're a little like it's very inconspicuous. You don't have any descriptions. The
No.
pictures are amazing. The watercolors are really abstract, but the way that you're working with the colors and the shapes and how they're mixing and a lot of them actually really remind me of like microbiology kind of
Yeah,
cellular
people have said
things.
that. It's yeah.
Uh, they're really, and I really love those that you start as like a very, very swirly kind of a doodle, and then you start filling in between.
Yeah,
Uh,
the neurographica.
is it
Yeah.
okay? Well, is it neurographic? Talk to me about
What
this
is
because I
that?
like, yeah, because I
Yeah.
don't know anything about it.
Yeah, well, I kind of fell into it as well. I so yeah, you'll see, so I'll kind of back up a little bit. You'll see on my Instagram that I do a lot. I'm kind of falling into I'm discovering kind of what my style is, or what I'm drawn to. And the neurographic piece came out of just observing other artists on Instagram. I mean, I'm kind of a quiet individual, independent artist, and that because it's something that I do really primarily for myself. To your point, uh I'm not in it for anything other than just doing my own work for what fulfills me, right? And I could talk a lot about that and that process,
That's why
especially
we're
having
here.
yeah, especially having been a professional photographer and lived the life of making money from my art. It's just I really made a very conscious decision that this is just for me, and I don't have interest in putting myself, I can find myself getting into that place sometimes. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have a gallery showing, or oh, maybe I should do this. But and then I there's just something about it that doesn't feel quite right, because it really is just a very personal process. So the neurographics work came out of this kind of lurking that I do on Instagram of other artists and just looking at their work. And I was seeing some of this neurographic stuff pop up from time to time. There's not a lot of it. It's actually a form of art therapy. Art therapists will use it with youth a lot of times in the process. And I just was really intrigued by it because I loved the way that it looked. And because it's a art, I really started this painting as a process for myself and as a way of connecting to that quiet space and just having a very tactile experience that I don't get in my day job because I'm staring at screens all day. I was like, oh, I'll try this neurographic stuff. It looks fun. It looks interesting. And so essentially the process is that you meditate on, and I mean meditate for like all of, briefly, we're not talking about long 20-minute meditations, but you sort of bring to mind something that's causing some sort of emotional discord for you. And then with that in mind, as you kind of meditate on that, you put your pen onto the paper and then draw. You don't lift your pen off the paper for a solid, 30 seconds while you just kind of draw out as you're meditating on this thing. And then you've got this big squiggle of lines. And then the idea is that any place that there's a sharp intersection, right, of the lines, you smooth that out. And so that's where you'll see it becomes kind of more fluid. But when you start off, it's this kind of jarring, like just lines all over the place and, hard intersections. And then you smooth those out. And then what I do, I'm not actually seeing other folks with watercolor doing it. A lot of times it's like they'll do it with like markers. They'll just color it. But I was like, well, those are like perfect little canvases, like canvas within a canvas to like create these tiny little, these tiny little spaces with color. And so I started doing that and really enjoyed it. I spent quite a while on those. I have since moved. I will go back to those for sure. I've since moved to doing quicker pieces. Those neurographic pieces take a long time. And I was finding that there were certain pieces like if I lost kind of interest in it, I'm not one to have like lots of pieces going on at one time. So if I lost interest in it, it would sit for a while. And then I would come back to it. And there was a time where it's like, I started working on a piece in, it was the day before I ran my first half marathon. And that was almost a year ago. And, cause the piece is called Pre-Race Jitters. And, I think I started working on it and then I didn't work on it for like a month or two. And it was like, just because I didn't feel connected to it. And I was like, well, so then I came back to it and I finished and I did another neurographic piece. I think it was at on Roe v. Wade when that decision came out. And I had a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of anxiety around that. But I think I moved away from it a bit and started working on these cellular pieces, they were originally the plant. I was originally conceiving them as planets. They were called planet doodles. And my husband was like, calling it planet doodle doesn't give it justice, and I was like, but that's just what it is. They're just doodles. He's like, no, they're more sophisticated than that. So
yeah, they look more like a inner cosmos kind of thing,
Yeah, I mean, and they've evolved, right? I mean, originally when I first started them, they really were just like throw some color down, do some doodles. It was very much just similar to the neurographic work. It was a meditative space of just like, let's just play with color and lines and my favorite thing with watercolor that I don't feel like you can get with any other medium is like, there's only so much control you have with the medium. And the process of just watching the color kind of explode onto the paper, the way you mix the water with the pigment and then the pigments with each other. And like, you kind of have to give it up to the universe of like, okay, there's only so much control I have in this. So I like the just the process of doing that. And so when I started it was like, yeah, I'm just doodling. I'm just like throwing paper or throwing color on, and I'm just drawing and whatever. But it's since evolved, and I think you can see that in my pieces.
Yeah.
They've evolved more, and they are, I think, I'm taking a more sophisticated approach where it's not just doodling. So since to your point, I don't have a lot of description. I don't, they originally were Planet Doodle number 1, Planet Doodle number 2. And my husband's like, yeah, no, I think you're doing a disservice. And I was like, all right, I'm just not going to call them anything because, because they are what they are. So, but I only started those in December, but I think that's going to be my space for a while, is doing those cellular, planetary, however you want to interpret it. For me, they're just circles with a lot of color.
What is informing them? What is informing? I mean, I get the meditative space and kind of, but they're very different from the neurographics. So can you talk a little bit? What is informing the shapes and the doodles and everything?
They are and they're not. They're actually the process. They're very different. I think the end result is very different.
Yeah, visually they're very different.
Visually they're very different, but they actually. I was reflecting on this as I was looking through my Instagram feed. And I will back up and say the only reason I even have this Instagram feed is because I felt this level. I started painting for myself. I actually started painting just I started doing watercolor just a few weeks before I had a major surgery. And when I had the surgery, I was basically in bed for like a week and a half to recover. And that's where I started, was like, well, I'm going to start watercoloring because I've got nothing else to do. There's only so many shows you can watch and so much reading you can do.
Yeah.
So I just kind of propped up my own little like in bed studio and was like, let's just do this, So I would create these tiny little pieces in my bed. And then it was like, well, what am I going to do with this? Like, I don't have any intention of like framing it or selling it or whatever. It's just for me. But there's like a relationship that I developed with this piece. And I didn't want to I didn't want to throw it away, but I also felt a level of guilt of like, just like putting it in a pile. Like it felt like it needed some, like I'd brought life to this thing and it had its moment, So I was like, well, I'll start an Instagram feed. And if I have 10 people that follow it, I don't care. Like, it's really just for me to be able to like take a picture and put it out into the world. And then I can put it in a pile because it's had its moment, So some of the pieces that you'll see on my Instagram feed, I'm like, I don't particularly love or care for or feel particularly proud of, but I'm like, but I gave it life and I promised it its moment. And here you are, So as I was looking through my feed and trying to figure like, well, how are all these things connected? Because, I feel like when I was a professional photographer, it was drilled into me, only show your best work, only show what you want to be known for. Oh, all of that. And I'm like, and my Instagram feed is not that. I'm not showing my best work. I'm not sticking to one particular style. I'm not, it's like, so I don't know, it's a very different way of existing as an artist when you're not trying to make money from it. But the consistency though is that I can tell I like circles and like organic shapes. That's very, very apparent, I think, as you move through my feed.
Hey, In the Arts Scene listeners. Do you remember Mark O'Donnell from Pixel 2 Editions? He's been on the show in Season 3, Episode 7, and told us everything we need to know about giclée printing. And take my word for it, Mark and his team are the best in Southern California and beyond. I've been a client of Pixel 2 Editions since 2019, and I've been shouting about them from the rooftops ever since. Luckily, I don't have to do it anymore because I have a podcast. Despite being San Diego local, Mark and his team are working with some of the best photographers and artists from all states, including Clark Little and Kadir Nelson. And frankly, if you are a photographer or a digital artist, you don't need to be local to work with Pixel 2 Editions. Just use a file upload on their website for your heavy images and write down the specs. They can print small proofs for you on any substrate you want and ship them to you for free. And for my listeners, they offer a free 8x10 full image proof on metal. Just tell them that you heard about them on the podcast and they will take care of you. Let me tell you, their metal prints are amazing. Whenever I order mine, they fly off the shelves in no time. So I highly recommend you try it out. And oh, did I mention that they are a full service company? It means that they do everything from color correcting and printing to framing and shipping directly to you or your clients. So don't wait, go to pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Again, pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Say hi for me. Yeah, I noticed that you have a lot of circles in there.
A lot of circles.
A lot of circles.
I know. It's kind of ridiculous. I joke about, I've basically been, I don't know if you know the book Vashti, The Dot.
No, I don't.
If you don't know it, it's such a good book. It's about this little girl named Vashti who doesn't consider herself an artist. And the art teacher says, just put your mark down on a paper. And she just makes this dot. Like, it really just kind of like, it's a dot. And the next day she comes into the classroom and the teacher has framed her dot with this like really ornate gold frame. And she was like, oh my God, I made a dot and it's art. And she's suddenly creating all of these circles all over the place, and it's big circles and little circles and it occurred to me, I didn't like intentionally be like, I'm going to be like Vashti and make these circles. But as I look back, I was like, oh, I'm totally doing that thing where I'm just like making, circles. Anyway, I like the idea of having a container within which I need to work. And the paper, I guess, can be that container, but it's a square container. And there's something about that doesn't feel quite right. And so having that, whether it's the neurographics where they have their own kind of containers that are pretty organic and circular, or an actual circle itself, there's that piece of it, of having the container within which I need to kind of create like a canvas within a canvas. But there's also like the neurographic piece. There's, as I described, there's the meditating and the drawing, creating the circles themselves, with the cellular planetary kind of stuff, also has that kind of feel to it. It's like the starting of the canvas, and then I put the color into it. So I actually create the circles just with water. So I'm being very meticulous about creating that circle with water and a brush, and that's it. And then once the paper has sufficiently kind of sucked up that water, that's when I introduce the color, and that becomes my palette. My husband asked me the other day, he was like, why don't you just use like a compass or something, to create a perfect circle? And I said, well, that's kind of the challenge in and of itself, is to, how can I create this circle, free form, and how can I get that just with water too? Because there's a way of seeing it that you have to like hold it against the light, and I don't know. So it's this whole process. So yes, they look very visually different, but I actually think they're very similar in kind of, at least from a process standpoint, how I go through it. And like I said, the process is for me, and it really is about being in a very tactile, meditative space where you can just play, and frankly just kind of let go, of just letting the watercolor do its thing, and knowing enough about my medium that I can control it to some degree, and then letting the rest of it go. And I appreciate the practice in letting and accepting kind of things as they.
Yeah, I have so much admiration for watercolor artists, because like, to me, this is anxiety provoking for me to begin with, because I mostly work 100%. with acrylic because I can't control it, and watercolor I was like, I can't. So the only work that I have done in watercolor quite recently, kind of, it was kind of a description of the late pregnancy and then early postpartum kind of thing, and that was intentional, because like the whole process was so chaotic.
Yes.
That the watercolor was the perfect medium for that, because like, well, I cannot control this process and I cannot control watercolor, and the color scheme was all kind of chaotic and like crazy. So, but other than that, I really like I have a really good watercolor set, and I am terrified at it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't know quite what it was that made me want to get into watercolor. I kind of fell into watercolor the same way I fell into photography. It was, and I always used to say this about photography that I just kind of had this moment where I was like, you know what? I think I really like photography. And then got into it and I fell in love with it. And it was like I kind of listened to my gut on that. And it was the same thing with watercolor. It was like, you know what? I like watercolor. I didn't know anything about it. I don't know why I thought I would like it, but as soon as I like watched the pigment explode on the paper in the water, it was just like, oh yes, this is exactly what I wanted, Um, and I've since heard there was a friend of mine who she's not an artist herself, but she's very, she loves art and following artists and stuff. And she said something similar. She's like, watercolor seems so hard and I have so much admiration. And I was like, I guess I look at it and I'm like, I mean, part of it is that I'm not trying to be precise with my watercolors. I'm not trying to control it. I mean, there's a level of control, obviously, but it's not even control so much as it sounds so like hippy dippy when I say this, but there's a level of like relationship with the water and the pigment where I understand the mechanics of it. I understand like how it likes to move. And so I can take that understanding and try to kind of dance with it, but so control isn't really the right word, but I'm not trying to create something that looks real. In fact, that's why, like I always say, like, the reason I do abstract is because there's no way for it to look. Anyone can look at it and think whatever they want. And great, you're right. That's what it is, Whereas if I was trying to draw like a realistic flower or something, you see so much of like flowers and landscapes and stuff with watercolor, and be like, well, that tree isn't quite right, or that whatever. Like that would just that's like not what I'm about. I just want to like play and create and develop relationships with these colors and just kind of have fun with it and not let go of that judgment of like feeling like it needs to be a certain way, that it needs to be perfect. Because frankly, I do that all day in my life. Like I need to be a certain way. I need to, that level of perfectionism. This is a space where I can just like let all that go. No expectations, just play, just be in a space,
It sounds like a great balance. And I really love the way you describe it as a relationship. It's really, really cool.
I was thinking, I was actually painting a little bit just before this conversation. And I found myself actually talking to the colors.
Really?
Yes. And I thought, oh my God, Jena.
Okay, well, I gotta hear about that conversation. What were you talking to?
Well, it wasn't a conversation because they definitely didn't talk back. I'm not, I mean, I don't need to be institutionalized quite yet, but no, it was just, so I'm trying to, in this process where I want to create, I'm trying to figure out a palette right now for my next piece because I just finished one and have been kind of experimenting with different palettes and I'm working with purples. And I can't quite figure out the right purple. But then I also was like, oh, I'm just going to introduce some yellow in this. And I was like, do I go with the yellow ochre? Or do I go with, there was this cadmium yellow. And so I was like popping the yellows onto the purple to see just kind of how they sink into the color, take up the color and or just move around on the paper. And it'll be things like, I'll put down the yellow ochre and be like, oh, you look nice. Oh, wow. You didn't really want to move through that, did you? Like I had these. It's almost like you talk to plants,
Yeah.
Water, or you're looking droopy today. That's how I talk to it. It's like, ooh, oh, you didn't like that mix, did you? Oh no, y'all aren't working together well. They have these like personalities, and now as I'm saying that out loud, I realize how kind of silly that sounds, but it's. But yeah, I developed the relationship with the colors, with the piece, and it feels like it has like a life of its own, I guess.
Oh, it's amazing. the way you're talking about it kind of reminds me yet another conversation I had with on the podcast with an artist, and you can go back and listen to it. By the way, she's a watercolor and acrylic artist, and she's been working with watercolor, I don't know, for years and years. Her style is totally different though, but she's now making her own. So she is purchasing pigments, and like organic binders, like honey based and
I
stuff.
think I saw this one as I was
Yeah,
scrolling through.
Dusty Bee. Yeah.
I remember tagging it and thinking, oh, I got to go back.
You might be really interested in listening to her talking about how different pigments behave and how they mix.
Yes,
and
they really do. Yeah, they really do. And I think that's the other piece with having a relationship with them, because there are certain colors that I'm drawn to, not just because of the color itself, but because of the way it behaves. And there are some colors that like there's this one that you'll see a lot in my latest work, Rose of Ultramarine, that I've become kind of obsessed with. And I moved away from it in my more recent pieces because I've just kind of like, okay, we need a break, but I'm coming back to it again, where it has this way of like, I don't know, like the way it separates into a variety of colors, where you can see the blues come out and the pinks, but then it also has like a relationship between that and other pigments, the way that they kind of, blending is not the right word, but they almost kind of can fight with each other sometimes, like kind of infiltrating one into the other. And that has a particular way of doing it. But then there's this other color that I've really struggled with. It's the Mayan blue, the Daniel Smith Mayan blue. I think I'm getting that right. Where like, it's a beautiful color and I love it. But when you paint with it, it has this kind of, it feels like kind of heavy and like it just kind of sits there. Whereas the Rose of Ultramarine like really explodes on the, so like they all have their different ways of being in the world. And I think that's
that's
this
really,
relationship
really,
with them, right? Like how they're going to behave. They have like they have their own personalities. And I think it's just that's what I love about it.
No, it's really fascinating. Yeah. It kind of makes me think about maybe I should, give it another go.
Yeah, I think I really do. For me, it really is about just making it abstract, and is a huge, huge part of my ability to be successful with the watercolor, because it's, it's just about accepting what happens rather than trying to control it. So I think if you get in the right mindset with it, that will make a big difference.
Yeah. Well, gonna try. I have another question. So you started, when you introduced yourself, you said that you were doing art in any form pretty much since you were very little, and then you mentioned that you were trained in cello and what was another instrument, and then you were dancing, and so those were performing arts. But
yes,
that kind of didn't stick with you. You like, because to me, and it's very interesting again, because I had another conversation with someone who was trained in music and then switched to a visual medium, more or less. So I guess I'm kind of like trying to make a connection, like in the brain, how those things are connected, because for me, performing arts and visual arts are very different. But
gosh, that's a good question. I mean, when I was really little, when I was in like elementary school, I was doing a lot of visual art. I remember I had this I don't know if it was a workbook or it was like a drawing book of horses, typical like, fourth grade kid who loves horses. I just used to sit and draw horses all day, and I got really into it. And I took a lot of art classes and, like after school clubs and stuff. But I think part of the performing arts, I think there was a lot to it. I mean, in some ways it was just because like, that's what like lessons were available in those things. Like, especially like I grew up in rural Wisconsin. It's not like we had a lot of opportunities to like go to art classes where I could be like painting and drawing and that kind of thing. At least I didn't know about it, or my parents didn't know about it at the time. So in some ways it's like, well, I could take cello lessons at school and I could be in the orchestra. There was a dance class, an after school kind of dance program that was near where my parents worked, so they could take me to that. And piano, we knew a piano teacher that was in this, in the neighborhood that I could take from. And I really loved those things. I mean, I actually tried out for or auditioned for the cello program at University of Wisconsin. I had visions of being a professional cellist. I mean, I loved it enough, thank God I didn't get into the program, because I would actually I don't think I would have actually been very happy. But yeah, I think it's, in some ways it was just like, that was what was available. Like at the end of the day, I'm an artist, and my medium will change depending on kind of what's available to me. Even the watercolor now, it's like, well, I could have seen myself getting into acrylic or some of these other things, but it just was the thing that made sense. And watercolor is available to me in the sense that, it doesn't take a lot, because of my kind of busy life as a full-time worker in a demanding job and a mother. Like, watercolor works well for me because the cleanup, I can pretty quickly set it out and clean it up. It's not like I have to have this big canvas that, with cleaning and all that. So I think it's, in some ways, the through line is that these things are available to me, and I'm sort of fundamentally an artist that finds a lot of joy in creating. But I'm not particularly tied to the method for doing that. And so, using, whether it's using music to create and kind of explore and connect to the world, or it's using watercolor, that's the through line, I think. For me, it's a very personal, it's a personal connection, and it's also just what was available,
Yeah. No, I get it. I totally get it, though, because since I had a baby, I barely did anything. And I'm kind of still trying to figure out what's going to be both accessible and spark the joy enough so I can occupy the kitchen table, because there's no other way for me to do stuff.
All of my stuff is set up at the dining room table. I'm just like, all right, it's coming out, we're doing it. And the weekends are filled with art at the dining room table. Eventually, we were talking about, we have a fairly big backyard, especially for San Diego. And we're eventually going to, and this is a few years down the line, but put in some sort of like studio in the back.
Oh my God.
Have my own, I know, right?
Oh my
It's
God.
like the dream.
The dream. Yes, absolutely the dream.
It is the dream. So yeah, eventually we'll do something like that. But for now, it's, I'm just at my dining room table, just creating art. And I think it's, in a lot of ways, probably, especially with my kids at this age, they're 9 and almost 12. And I think it's really good for them to see me at the dining room table creating art. I know it's inspired them to have more art in their lives. So you just do what you can with the space you have.
Yeah, exactly. So we're almost at the top of the hour, but I also have one more question for you. So sure. You said that you're working with artists a lot with your day job, and obviously, like, your day job is like very structured, and you're a big executive. But how do you can you talk a little bit about your experience working with artists in that setting?
My experience working with artists in that setting. Can you be more specific in terms of?
I'd like, well, in what cases and how you are interacting with them, like what's the conversation? I mean, what's the conversation maybe about, or are you being involved in the creative process with them in like some ways, or like, I just want to know how that happens.
No, so my work is really, I don't engage in the creative process with the artists. I'm really, it's more like, how do we enable them to engage in the creative process? So my work is more around community building with artists, offering supportive programs for them, whether it's, learning about various elements of the industry, or things like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome, or, being able to sort of it's kind of what I was saying before, like coming into your own as like, I am a credible artist who deserves to have my work seen, and all that. And then advocacy. So we will talk with artists and executives that work with artists about the importance of gender diversity in their organization. So I'm kind of like creative adjacent in that space, that I'm supporting the artists in the development of their like professional identity rather than their craft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And when you're talking about artists, you're talking about the folks who are taking the program, not necessarily the artists who are coming as, I don't know, the teaching artists or some sort of mentors, or do you work with those too?
Well, we work with the mentors, and we work with creatives that taught. So they'll do, we work with people that are like directors and storyboard artists and stuff that are doing the work, then talking to our members about the work that they're doing. So again, kind of adjacent in that way. So, and I oversee the staff that works more directly with those folks. Like we have a mentorship program where our program manager is working with the mentors who are creatives in their field. She's working with them all the time. So, and helping them think about like, well, what do they want to do their mentoring on? What's their area of expertise? She's helping with them. My job is to support our program manager to get done, to do that work. So I'm kind of creative adjacent in all that way. But I really love it because, I do feel, I love organizational development, organizational management, leadership development, all of those aspects. So then to be able to be in that every day but do it in service to creatives is really powerful. It's wonderful work. I'm really very pleased to be there.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. And so I wanted to ask you to spell out if any of our listeners are falling into the categories that you serve. So women identified, transgender women, then non-binary, right? Non-binary, who want to be involved in the animation industry. As creatives or otherwise. How do they find you? How do they connect? What the steps they need to take?
Yeah, 100%. So, though they can go to our website, it's womeninanimation.org. So, we're going through a bit of a process where we're trying to eventually will be just WIA. But right now it's Women in Animation because we want to just be more inclusive of our entire membership. But they can go to womeninanimation.org, and they'll learn about all of the programs that we have, and the various ways that they can get involved.
And for people who want to see your watercolor arts, how do they find you?
Just Instagram. I'm very simple. So it's jenaolson.art. So JenaOlson.art.
On Instagram.
On Instagram, yes.
Got it. All righty.
Exclusively
on Instagram.
Yes. More like I just don't have the energy to do it anywhere else.
It will be a very, very short show notes for this episode. Well, nonetheless, I will include in the show notes, you guys, go to intheartscene.com. There will be show notes for this episode as usual for any other episode. Will be some information about Jena, will be some information about WIA. There will be all the links and even the link for the book that you recommended, because now I know like that's going to be my next in the reading list.
Good. It's great.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being with me today. Welcome. And you sounded really clear, even though you were outside. I didn't catch, like I was more worried about my baby crying.
Oh, really? I didn't hear your baby crying. I'm like, I've got this, like, at one point, it's like, oh, I'll be quiet. I'm like a helicopter went over, and then there's like sirens, and my umbrella's moving. I was like, oh, Jena, really, and it's windy today.
Yeah, it is windy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm glad that didn't.
No, it sounds really great. Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time in the art scene.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye. It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple. And go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the art scene.